Hi homesteaders, my name is Melissa with Gullion Homestead and welcome to my channel where I focus on homesteading skills, self-sufficiency, and resilience. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Please like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming content. We're working on growing our YouTube channel, trying to educate people on how you can homestead in a neighborhood, in an urban community. So we are today working on some things that I grabbed out of the garden this morning. It is early, really early, and I'm headed out to work and thought I would go ahead and start my preserving stuff that I'm going to do for the weekend. So it is Thursday and it's very early in the morning. Steve just left for work and I had some things out in the garden I had to do before I headed out to work. And I thought I would just go ahead and start a video now on what I'm going to do this morning to get going on some preserving heading towards the weekend. So it's Thursday morning. I like to share things. I've been thinking a lot about sharing these things on my channel just to show how even if you're working full-time, there are things that you can do that take really very little time. So I've been out in the garden this morning. I've been out there for maybe 10 minutes and I picked some green beans. I only found one strawberry, but I checked the strawberry plants. Also checked the squash plants to make sure we didn't have any squash bug issues, which I've had no squash bug issues this year, but I replanted some spaghetti squash and now we're having squash bug issues. So I'm not very happy with that. If you don't know, soapy water is a great way of getting rid of those. There's only been like, I've only killed like 5 or 6 and I've got 3 plants out there, but my plants are very small and very tender. They're not very they're not overgrown yet. I planted them late in the season because I actually had some squash that went bad by a squash vine borer. So my summer squash went bad. I pulled that out. And then actually I also had a Hubbard squash in there that went bad. So I decided to go ahead and plant some spaghetti squash to see if I could get some production out of that for the rest of the season. I tried a spaghetti squash over in the vertical garden and I don't know if it got choked out by the loofah. I only got one spaghetti squash, which is this beautiful baby right here. I'm happy about that. But Steve and I need about 10 to 15 of these to make it through the winter because we don't eat pasta. So now I'm in a situation where either I'm going to have to buy spaghetti squash so I'm trying to grow some. So that's what's going on this morning. And then I pulled my apple mint out of the dehydrator and I'm getting ready to throw some other things in. So I thought I would just start a video off this morning. I'm going to continue it out throughout the weekend with the things that we are doing to preserve this weekend. So it is Labor Day weekend. It's a long weekend and things are starting to, in our gardens, things are starting to slow down. There are some things that are really pumping up, like our sweet potatoes and our loofah are phenomenal. The peppers are just now starting to come in. So that's exciting, but some of the other stuff is kind of slowing down. So for instance, the green beans have really slowed down. Last week, I barely got any green beans. This week, I'm actually working on a bag this size, which, let's see, a couple weeks ago, I got like 3 bags this size. So I didn't even get this last week. So I'm pretty happy that I have this so far. Plus I've got more green beans in my harvest basket right here that I'm going to show you as well. So I no longer am canning green beans the rest of the season. I have more than enough canned green beans. So I have been eating these fresh, but Steve and I have had a lot of fresh green beans in the past 2 weeks. I've literally only had enough coming out of the garden to do fresh cooking. But all of a sudden I got this big burst of green beans and now there's more flowers out there. I'm going to fertilize this weekend with some fish fertilizer to see if that kind of helps boost things so we can get some more for freezer beans. So I will be blanching these this weekend and I will add that to my video so you guys can see that. But we're going to start today by just talking about dehydrating your teas and mints, basil, anything that you want to dehydrate. So I have dehydrated my apple mint. Now I don't have a lot of time this morning, and so when I dehydrated my apple mint, I actually pulled it off the stems. So I didn't have a lot of stemmy stuff, which makes it a little bit easier when you are trying to preserve. But what I have right here is orange mint, and There are some stems on there, not a lot. I'm probably just going to throw this on my dehydrator mat because I don't really have a lot of time. I've got to head out today. I have a long drive to Bloomington, which is about an hour and a half away from here. So I don't really have time to be messing around with stuff this morning because I got to get out the door. So basically I dehydrate these in my dehydrator, and you just want to make sure it's nice and dry. And then I'm just going to nicely pull it off the stem that it has and crunch it up with my hands. This is not hard at all. And this apple mint, we didn't get as much apple mint this year as I wanted to, but the apple mint plants were brand new for us. So I'm anticipating that next year we're going to get a lot more apple mint. So that's what I'm anticipating. And it might even add a little bit more apple mint to the garden next year just to kind of encourage more growth out there, because I really have heard, I've not had apple mint before, but I've really heard that a lot of people like apple mint. It's their favorite tea. It works well when you're sick, especially if you have an upset stomach. And so, but it smells fabulous. So I'm just going to crunch this up, and then we are going to add it to our tea jar that I've already started. And I have a tea jar for my apple mint. I have apple mint, orange mint, and berry mint in the garden. And I have a jar for each. I will say that my apple mint jar is not near as full as my other jar. So that's okay. That's just part of, you never know what you're going to get and out of your garden. It's just part of it. So here is my apple mint jar. So this is a half-gallon jar. So I have maybe a third of it full, or maybe it'll be a third full after this. And the other two are close to being half full. I have a goal to have half a gallon of each tea in my pantry before winter comes. So basically by October, I want to make sure I've got a half gallon of all of these. Probably not going to get that out of the apple mint this year, but I have a lot of orange mint here. So I'm thinking I'll probably make it to the berry mint, berry mint and orange mint. Probably will get to that goal. And then also I do have that goal already with my lemon balm. So one thing when you dehydrate, you're going to want to make sure that you're kind of moving your jar around every couple of days, because you want to make sure there's no moisture or condensation in the jar, or your tea will start to mold. So keep that in mind. I normally keep this out on the counter after I add my tea in there, and I just really just toss it. It's called conditioning. I just condition that like once or twice a day. If you start to see any kind of condensation in the jar, then that is a sign that you have moisture in the jar, because you have a lid that's screwed down tight, and so it's going to produce condensation if there's moisture. If that does happen, you can just take all of the tea that you have and throw it back down on the mat and stick it in your dehydrator, and that will work. So you can see that is super easy. I probably would not have even done this morning. I probably would have just left this out here on the mat and dealt with it this evening. But I decided to go ahead and start a video, and in the process of that, I thought, why not just go ahead and show you guys how to do that. So now what I'm going to do is, I do have some pieces of grass in here from when I cut my mint, but my mint is very clean. It actually was just watered because I have an irrigation system out there. The dog does not get around this, so it's pretty clean. So typically I do not rinse this off. Now, if it's something that I think the dog has been around, I absolutely will do that. So I am just going to throw my mint on this dehydrator tray. And let me go get another dehydrator tray because this is getting kind of full. I'm going to take this out to the dehydrator, throw this in, and basically I'm just going to toss this in there and let it dehydrate pretty much all day at a low setting. I don't like to do it very high because I don't like to take some of the taste and nutrients out of the tea. Okay, so if I have any dead place pieces like that are kind of look like they've already died on the stem, I just go ahead and pull those out, and you can see that I was able to get about 2 trays up, which is great because I didn't even get a full tray of the apple mint when I did it the other day. So you get about 2 full trays of your peppermint tea, your orange mint tea right here. And I'll put that in the dehydrator, let it, I'll check it this evening before we go to bed to see if it's ready. If it's ready, I'll pull it out. If not, sometimes I just keep it in the dehydrator after it's done, let it sit there for a couple days because I don't have time to do it. So I'm going to take that to the dehydrator. Okay, now what I'm going to do is when you don't have time to process your vegetables, your green beans, whatever it has, whatever you have, the best thing to do is to use bread bags. They have more flow through them, I feel like. They're thinner than these bags. I get a little condensation in these and even in the fridge, but I'm out of those right now. I'm going to try to stop and get some of those today, but I do have gallon Ziplocs. And so when I am gathering things out of the garden, if I don't have enough to eat that day or preserve that day, I just pull what I get. So you can see we got probably about a quart this morning, which is pretty phenomenal, because I haven't been really getting, I mean, it's late August, so to get a quart of green beans for me has been kind of phenomenal, only because we got a lot early in the season. And so things are, you know, my beans are starting to get kind of spent, and it's just kind of getting towards the end of the gardening season. I took my basket outside because I saw a tiny little spider, and I'm trying to keep spiders out of my house right now because it seems to be a problem this time of year. So I'm just going to clean this up, and that is it. That is how fast you can do something in a very quick 10 minutes a morning, 10 minutes out in the garden, 10 minutes in your kitchen, and then you can be out the door for work. Quite often what people think is, how do you have time to do that? I don't have time to do that. I have children. I have a job. I've got all those things too. I don't have children, but I do have grandchildren. And I work a full-time job, and we own a winery. So we actually are making wine in the evenings and the weekends. We are very busy as well, but homesteading is very dear to our hearts. Steve and I have a goal to live on a homestead at some point. And so right now we're homesteading right where we're at. We have 3 gardens plus an herb garden. I share that all the time on this video. We've got a working pantry and a long-term pantry, a very small long-term pantry. And we preserve pretty much everything that we can. Even if we buy it from local farmers, we buy very little from the grocery store because we are trying to support our local economy. And we also are trying to put healthy stuff into our body. So it doesn't take long. You just have to fit 10 minutes in here or there to actually work on your garden. All right, so we'll be back later on, either this evening or tomorrow, with the next part of this video on kind of the preserving that we're going to do out of the garden this weekend. So we'll be back. Okay, it's Friday morning. It is 7:53 a.m. I've been out in the garden since 7:45, so I literally spent 8 minutes out in the garden. Timed myself this morning because I wanted to make sure I could share with you guys how you can do stuff in just a few minutes a day. So I went out this morning, checked the orange mint we worked on yesterday morning. It is completely ready to jar up for our tea and start to condition it. Then when I was out this morning, I picked some things out of the garden. So I'm just going to briefly show you how we move forward first thing in the morning to get some things done and start off our day. So just like we did yesterday morning, I'm just going to take the tea that I have, and I am just going to scrunch it up in my hands and try to get the stems off of it. Now, the stems don't really bother me too much if I get some stems in my tea, because it's not really going to be in my tea, and I'm going to strain that out. So it's not a huge deal for us, but if you're going to be giving this away as gifts, of course, it would look nicer not to have stems in it, but not really a huge deal. So I am just going to, and I'm going to use these same trays to do some other tea that we are going to dehydrate today during the day. And then it will be ready by this evening or tomorrow to stick in our jars. So my goal with this video is just to show you how just a few minutes, a couple of times a day, how you can really work on some homesteading skills. So we don't necessarily claim to have a homestead here because we live in an urban community, but we are working on homesteading skills, and that is really what our channel is about. Our channel is about homesteading skills, self-sufficiency, and resilience. So there's no reason why you can't have the same skills that people who live on an actual farm have as well. And that part of that is gardening, growing your own food, preserving your own food, and really trying to source things locally from your local farmers. Most farmers or homesteaders will not claim to grow every single thing that they eat. It's really just too difficult to grow everything that you have. Most people don't have that ability. They don't have the ability to do seed oils or olive oil, avocado oil, those kind of things. They don't have the ability to grow every fruit that they enjoy. So a lot of times they'll source from other places like a local orchard, or a lot of homesteaders will buy from AzureStandard.com, which is what we buy from. We buy from Azure Standard and do a pickup once a month. So I got a lot of sticks in here, which again, I don't really care about, but if I can pull some big chunks of sticks out, I would prefer to do that. All right, so we are done here. I've got my orange mint tea all ready to put into the jar. So here is the orange mint tea I have right now. And all I'm going to do is pour this back in here like I did yesterday with our, let's see, what did we do yesterday? I think we did berry mint or apple mint yesterday. And then I'm just going to keep this on the counter and condition it and continue to mix that up. So we're right about half of a gallon. My goal was, or a quarter of a gallon. This is a half-gallon jar. My goal is to have a half a gallon before the end of October of this. It is getting ready to go to seed. So I'm trying to kind of stunt that and stop that. Then the apple mint, we actually aren't too far off with the apple mint. I thought we had a lot more of the others than we do. So what I decided this morning is after some thought and looking at the garden, I have a bunch of new lemon balm that has come up here recently. It's probably just like new seeded lemon balm, and it's not gone to seed. And it was pretty tender and fresh. So I decided to go ahead and dehydrate some of that. I went ahead and picked some this morning because if I don't get a half gallon of all of my other teas, I want to make sure that we've got 2 full gallons of tea going into winter. Now, we have a lot of we have half a gallon of lemon balm, so I'd really would like more of a variety of tea, but I hate to also just let that stuff die. But I also hate to lose that tea for the winter and just let it die, and then we have to buy tea from somebody. So I went ahead this morning and picked some lemon balm tea, and I am just going to do what we did yesterday morning. There's a few pieces of grass in here, but I had grass with the other ones too. And you can see, just going to throw this on a tray and get that ready to stick in the dehydrator. And then I'm going to, so it looks like I'll have 2 trays. 2 trays, and I'll stick that in the dehydrator here shortly, and then we will have some lemon balm tea tomorrow to stick in our jar. So we'll have to start a new jar for that. That's okay, no big deal. All right, let's look at what else we got picked this morning. I got 1 strawberry. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this 1 strawberry. Oh no, I got 2 strawberries, and then I only got like, I don't know, maybe a half a quart of green beans this morning, but there were a lot of small tender beans out there that weren't ready to be picked. So I'll probably do that they might be ready by this evening or tomorrow. But then either tomorrow or Sunday, I'm going to do a big supply of freezer beans in the next couple of days. So I'm just going to take what I have out of the garden this weekend, probably try to get that done before the end of the weekend, before the holiday, because we do have plans now on the holiday that we did not have. So now I'm going to have to rearrange my preserving schedule this weekend a little bit, but we're going to blanch those green beans and freeze them in bags for the freezer for winter. So I will talk a little bit more about that as time allows when we're moving towards our green bean preserving. But one thing I wanted to show you about my green beans is this morning I have a seed pod that came out of my green beans. And that is what it looks like. And basically this sat on the plant long enough that it's produced a seed for us. So this morning I have now normally it's a little bit drier than this, or I let it sit a little bit longer to dry, but I just want to show you guys that this is what, as I just dropped it on the floor, that is what the seed looks like. See that? And so I'm going to save these seeds, and pretty much by the time October rolls around, we're going to have a lot of that on there. Like the plant's going to be spent, not really good for eating, but it's going to be great for seed saving. So we will have these green beans. These are Kentucky Wonder pole beans, and we will have Kentucky Wonder pole beans saved for next year. So I'm going to throw those in my bag. And the last little project I'm going to work on are my strawberries. Let me pull out my strawberries that I'm working on so you guys can see what I'm talking about. So we put our strawberries in the garden in the spring. Then we also planted some strawberry plugs this fall. Just did that about 2 weeks ago. So I'm working on getting those developed, and they're doing great. So we only get less than a handful of strawberries a day. And I do eat them sometimes. But I actually had purchased strawberries locally and have been eating those. And so as the strawberries come out of the garden, what I am working on is, and this is a great thing you can do if you're starting your strawberries, is I just have a quart-sized bag. I clean my strawberries, I hold them, and I throw them in this bag, toss them in the freezer. Now, I'm probably only going to fill this quart bag up this year. Next year, we're going to have all kinds of strawberries for fresh eating. But this year, I'm going to stick this in the freezer, and I'm going to save this for either a rhubarb strawberry cobbler. I've got rhubarb in the freezer too. I might make a rhubarb strawberry jam. This also would be great for a smoothie. But just because you don't have a lot coming out of your garden at once doesn't mean you can't still use it. If you're not going to eat it fresh, I do eat it fresh sometimes, and sometimes I throw it on salads. But now we're really at the end, way at the end of our strawberry season. So they're coming off like 1 or 2 at a time. Those plants are just, the roots are developing, and it's just getting a nice, strong plant for next spring. So next spring, we should have a fabulous strawberry patch. Our patch is 3 foot by 12 foot, and it's already starting to put off runners. And so I think we're going to have a lot of strawberries next year, and I'm excited for that. All right, that is it for this morning. We reeled this in like 10 minutes. That's doing a video. If you're not doing a video, probably can do this in like 5 to 6 minutes. This is how you continue to do homesteading skills while you're working full time and you've got kids. Just take 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and do little projects. You don't have to sit down all in one big like time frame in your day and do all of your homesteading at once. Literally just build on what you have, do 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and we'll be back probably tomorrow, probably not this evening, probably tomorrow, to let you know what we're doing next. All right? We'll see you then. Okay, guys, so yeah, it's Labor Day weekend, and I ended up not getting near as much done as I wanted to because we went down the street and visited a local orchard so I could grab some apples for not really preserving, but for fresh eating. And we did not pick our own apples, but we did take a walk through the orchard. And the orchard is just so peaceful and so beautiful, as you can see. And normally what I do is I pick up a bag of apples. We eat on them this time of year just for a couple of weeks, and then I'll chop them up and dehydrate them for the winter so that we have apples for snacks and apples for cream of wheat, oatmeal, that kind of thing. So yeah, really great visit here today, Labor Day weekend, just enjoying a local business that we love to go to. I have a lot going on in the kitchen right now, so it's not super picked up, but I'm okay with that because that is just the reality of living in today's world. So I have done a lot today. So it's the end of the day. I have started some bread. My bread is actually fermenting in my oven right now. I have a ton of sourdough discard and sourdough starter, and I have got a huge goal to try to get through that in the next 2 weeks because we are leaving on vacation, and I wanted to have bread to take with us on vacation, but also I wanted to start prepping for Thanksgiving. I know it seems like Thanksgiving is so far away, but it really isn't. It is September, and in 2 short months, we will be stuffing our faces and celebrating Thanksgiving and moving towards the Christmas holiday. And so I wanted to go ahead and get some bread baked and in the freezer. So I have bread for gifts. I have bread for Thanksgiving when we have our whole family over. I don't want that stress right before the holidays. And so this is a great way for me to actually kind of get moving with that. So I'm starting off today by just making we haven't had bread in the house for probably 6 weeks or so. And I don't love having bread around here because I can't stop eating it. So it's a problem of mine. I love bread. But I am making just a single loaf. I believe I'm just going to make a single loaf. I might divide it into 2 smaller loaves. I'm actually thinking about doing that. That is kind of the issue because we can't really eat a whole loaf of bread before it goes bad in our house. So having and normally I cut it in half and stick it in the freezer. So actually having a smaller loaf would be better for us. And then I wanted to make some actual sandwich bread, which I've never done before, to take with us on vacation because we are going to be hiking and that'll be great for sandwiches. So got a lot going on in the kitchen today, but I wanted to finish this video up just to show you guys my last little project of fermenting that I'm doing from the garden. And this is probably going to be the last one I'm going to do for a while. And I say that because we literally have no green beans coming out of the garden. The green beans have gone to seed. So today I'm going to finish up by freezing the rest of my green beans that I have. We've got Lutha, which will not be ready to pull until October. We've got sweet potatoes that won't be ready to pull till October. So I know I review this with a lot of my videos, but it's just things are going out there and they're just not ready to be processed yet. So I did plant another section of carrots. So now we've got 3 sections of carrots. I think I may have done that since the beginning of this video. And then we also have sweet or sugar snap peas going, and they are looking fabulous. It's warm today, but it's actually been kind of cool, and then it's supposed to cool off again. And those are a cool winter crop. They love the cold weather. The tomatoes are doing decent. I'm actually getting some new fruit that's actually setting on my black currant tomatoes. So things are still happening in the garden, but I don't anticipate anything coming out of the garden except maybe some jalapenos between now and the time we leave for vacation. So we're at the end of the green bean season, and I know I've shared on this channel before, we got a ton of green beans and wax beans this year. We ended up with, I think I've lost count now, but we have well exceeded how many green beans I wanted to have preserved for the next 2 years. So I am doing my best at growing a lot of things in my garden at once and preserving them for 2 years. So, and this was the whole goal with the beans. So probably we'll not plant beans next year unless we decide we wanted a few beans for fresh eating, which could happen, but it won't be near the amount of beans we had this year. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pull out the beans and we're going to start working on processing those beans and getting them in the freezer. Last night I ended up staying up late and I processed 20 pounds of pickles. We ended up getting 32 jars of pickles. I went ahead and popped one open today, even though I know you're not really supposed to do that, but I wanted to see how they turned out. It was my first time actually making these types of pickles. I do a quick pickle, but I've never processed any pickles before. And I did pickles with, that's why all of my canning stuff is still out here. So I do pickles in the refrigerator, and that is something that we do really love, or I should say I love, and so does Hazel, my granddaughter. But I've not really ever processed them in a water bath canner before until last night. And I would say they did turn out quite like I wanted them to. However, they're better than I kind of thought they might be too. I don't know if that makes any sense. But I ordered some grape leaves offline and used a grape leaf to put into my pickle to help with the tannins. And I do think that that may have helped a little bit, but I think the processing that I did for the 10 minutes was probably too much and maybe overcooked my pickles. So I wouldn't say they're mushy, but they're not like crisp like I was wanting them to be. So I currently have 3 pickling cucumber plants right now that are growing in the garden for a fall garden. And one of them has blooms on it. So I'm assuming when we get back from vacation, I will have some pickles to process at that point. So I think what I'm going to do is try a different recipe. I have a pickling recipe book that I was using, and I have pickled other things out of there before that has turned out really good and has been really firm. But the recipe I used for the pickles wasn't really that great. So I'm either going to do just refrigerator pickles with what I get out of the garden, or I might go ahead and test another recipe just so I know that for next year. But honestly, we have enough pickles probably to last us 2 years. I did spears and I did chips. And as much as I like a really firm pickle, I would also say these pickles are still going to be fine for a sandwich. So I'm not too concerned about it. And I have a feeling that Hazel will be fine with it too. So I am just going to snap my beans. When you get your beans out of the garden, a couple of things that I do that I'd just like to share with you is you've seen before on this channel and even on this video where I go out, I pick my green beans, I bring them in, stick them in a plastic bag, put them in the fridge, and then I do the same thing the next day. So I probably have, I would say I probably have 5 or 6 quarts here. Not sure what exactly I have, but I just continue to collect them. I do not wash them when they come out of the garden. At first, I put them in the fridge because I want them to be nice and dry so they don't grow any mold. Put them in the fridge. These have been there for about 10 days. They still look fabulous. I have no mold, no discoloration on any of them. They look great. So all I'm going to do is snap my green beans. Some of them are a little bit stringy just because they're late in the season. They're, like I said, that plant is going to seed. So because it's going to seed, a lot of the green beans were starting to get a little wonky, a little beany. So, they can be a little bit stringy, but the string pulls off of them just fine. So we'll be back here in a few minutes after I get all of these snapped, and we'll start the next process in freezing and preserving these beans right out of the garden. All right, guys, I was snapping my green beans, and I thought this was a great lesson too, that sometimes you get green beans after they sit in the fridge for a while and they're a little wimpy. So this one actually just started to come apart on me, and then I got some bean seeds. So I'm just going to let these sit out and kind of dry out even more. So I ended up getting 4 bean seeds from this pod right here, which is basically what's happening out in my garden right now. Anyway, that plant, that green bean, like that whole trellis is going to seed. So there's all kinds of pods that you can actually see the beans in them. So I'm just letting them like turn yellow out there, yellow or brown, so they're nice and dry. And then I'll pull all those off, and then we'll have seeds for the next few years. These seeds typically will last 2 to 3 years in a dry, cool place. So I have a seed library. I'll just keep them in there. And then my plan is next year is maybe try to switch and share some seeds with some other people, so I don't have to buy any seeds, especially if it's something that I'm looking for. I'm not really sure exactly everything that's going into the garden next year, but I do know that green beans is not one thing that we are going to grow a lot of. We're going to grow maybe a small trellis of green beans, but not in the arch trellis will not be green beans. We're actually like thinking about doing some melon or something, maybe a squash or something like that. So thought I would share with you, that is something that I just found when I was snapping my beans. So some of my beans are, like this one is not that great of a bean because it's kind of discolored. It's a yellow wax bean. It was towards the end as well. So just going ahead and continuing to snap my beans. And this is what we have so far. And if you don't know, if you've never snapped beans, you basically just snap each end of them and then break them into bite-sized pieces. And if you get a string like that, it'll just pull right off. So pretty simple, nothing really too phenomenal here that you're learning, I'm sure. But I did just want to share with you my process for freezing beans and how great they can be for soups and stir fries. Not really great for fresh eating in the wintertime, but when you take a frozen green bean and put it in your whatever it is you're cooking in the winter, it seriously tastes like you just pulled it right out of the garden. And I love that about fresh frozen green beans. That's something you do not get when you can. So that's why I have a passion to have a little stash of fresh frozen green beans in my freezer. So I've got those for the winter time. Okay, so I have washed some green beans. I have 2 baskets of green beans. I have this great strainer, and all I'm going to do is fill this strainer up. It's like a double boiler. It sits inside this other pan, and I'm just going to fill this up with water. I'm going to pull that strainer out for right now, and I'm going to set that over here, and then we're going to cook this on the stove. So I'm just going to throw my water on the stove, and like I said, I've got a lot of things going on here because we've been doing some preserving, but I wanted to share with you that it took me about 30 minutes to snap all of those beans. So 10 minutes in the morning the first day, working on some things, 10 minutes the second day, and then we've spent 30 minutes here snapping beans. So I like to just share how we kind of fit that into our life. And it's 30 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes here. We just are very intentional about the time that we use here in our home doing whatever it is we need. Sometimes Steve has a list of projects that he needs to do, and he'll pick one project that he can do in 10 minutes. And then the next day when he's got 2 hours, he'll pick a bigger project. And so this is just what we do to just kind of keep moving in our home and to make sure that we're productive people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this water to a boil. And the purpose behind actually blanching your green beans, which is what you have to do prior to freezing them, is there is an enzyme in certain vegetables, green beans being one of them, that it will continue to like mature your green bean. Like and so then you'll get maybe not that great of a flavor, and I think you lose some of your nutritional value. I'm sure somebody in the comment section can tell me for sure what that enzyme does, but all I know is that there's an enzyme that you want to stop. And in order to stop that, you have to blanch. And the way you blanch is you boil your vegetable, whatever, for 1 to 2 minutes, and then you want to immediately put it in cold water to stop the cooking process. And then you are ready to freeze your vegetables. So that is what we're working on now. We'll be back here in just a minute when this is up to boiling, and we'll work through the next process of preserving and freezing our fresh green beans. Okay, I thought real quick I would get in here and look at my bread. So I have a proofing oven, and I'm in the process right now of making bread. So like I said earlier in the video, I thought we'd take a peek at what's going on in here. So my bread has been, it's only been proofing for 2 hours. And so I'm waiting for that to like double in size. It is not there at all. I might not even be able to make bread today, but typically I let my bread proof for about 6 hours in the proofing oven. It's kind of chilly in my house because today's kind of warm and I have the air on. So when it's really warm out, it will proof pretty much in the kitchen. But I use my proofing oven all the time, especially when we have the air conditioning on or in the winter, because it actually will help with the rise of my dough. For my water to heat up, I went ahead and took a big bowl out and threw some ice in it. And then I'm going to put some ice cold water and get this really cold so we can stop the process, the cooking process of our beans. So you can do this a couple of different ways. I've seen people actually just run their cold water over their beans, but I always do an ice bath is what I usually do. And so a lot of times my ice will start to melt as well, because your green beans are so hot going into it. So I'm just going to get my water nice and cold in my bowl right here. You can see just nice and cold. And yeah, it's pretty chilly in there right now. And then we'll take these green beans once they're blanched and we'll stick them in there. So it's getting hot, but not quite to boiling. I want it to be boiling before I actually dip my green beans in the water. So I've got it. Actually, I didn't have it on high. I'll turn it on high now. But it'll start a rolling boil, which is preferred. I sometimes don't wait till it's quite rolling. Let me turn this water off. Sometimes I don't wait till it's quite rolling, and then we'll dip those in. Still have to make dinner tonight. Getting ready to clean up the kitchen once this is done, and then I'm gonna probably throw something in the Instant Pot. I've got some stewed beef out, but what I wanted to stop to ask is if there's something that you're interested in learning about, section below, because I would love to be able to share some other things. Like, are you interested in bread? Are you interested in how we use our preserved food? Are you going to be interested in what's going to happen when we take the loofah out of the garden? Are you interested in the curing process of sweet potatoes? What is it that you're interested in? Are you interested in jams? What is it that you're interested in? What are you looking for on YouTube? What can we do to help educate you on homesteading and self-sufficiency? So please put that in the comment section below. Also, if you have any suggestions with anything that we've done today, if you have a better way of doing things, I welcome those suggestions. I actually am always learning, and I've been doing this stuff for quite a while, but I'm always learning something new, and I'm happy to take suggestions. It's not to a rolling boil, but it's starting to have some little bubbles like it's getting ready to start boiling. So I'm going to go ahead and take it for what it's worth, and we're going to go ahead and stick our green beans in our pot. You can see that going right there. And I'm going to go let it go for about a minute or so. There's a couple of ways that you can do this. And I've done it both ways, but I think for time's sake, what I'm going to do is I have little ice left in here. So I'm literally going to pull my green beans out with my strainer here and put it right into the ice bath and let that do its thing. And I'm going to leave that in there for just a minute. And now I'm just going to take my other washed green beans, throw them in here. Alexa, set a timer for 1 minute.
1 minute, starting now.
So I've got the timer going right now. These are going to cook. These should sit in here for about 1 to 2 minutes. So by the time my alarm goes off, it'll be time for these to come out and those will go back in. And so we really only had 2 batches. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do this. You actually could take this whole pot and dip it right into, it's not that deep though, so I was afraid that maybe it wouldn't actually sit in my pan or my bowl here. So this is why I chose to do it this way. And then basically I'm just going to take what green beans come out of here and I'm going to put them in here before we stick them in bags for the freezer. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. You can actually take this out and put it on a tray to let it freeze flat if you would like to. I've done that before, but I'm not going to do that now because honestly the tray I have is full of shredded cheese and so that's not going to work for me. So Okay, so the timer's done. And I'm just going to strain my green beans. And you can see they look really nice and bright. That's the great thing about this process versus canning, because when you can, you don't necessarily get this look. It gets a little kind of dark and dull. I'm going to set those aside there. I'm going to turn this off, and now it's time to actually stick. These are blanched, and it's time to put them in an ice bath as well. Now, I will say that water has warmed up. So I think what I'll do is just throw a few ice cubes in there, just because I want to make sure that this actually stops the cooking process. So let me grab a couple and I'll be right there. We'll just throw those in there. And these can actually sit in here for a minute because nothing is happening here. This is just stopping the cooking process. So this is not hurting the green beans at all. And so we're going to go back over to our countertop and we are going to get these in freezer bags. Okay, so I've got my green beans, and for convenience, typically what I do is I just take my green beans and I measure them in a 4-cup measuring jar. And because I do that because this is a quart right here. And so once you cook them down, then you'll get like a quart of cooked down blanched green beans, which actually takes you pretty far. I mean, if you buy a quart of green beans at the grocery store, raw, by the time you cut the ends off, snap the beans and cook them down, you're gonna have a little bit less anyway. So this gives me a good quart, and there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm gonna use freezer bags today. In the past, I've actually used my Food Saver, but my Food Saver bags are pretty small right now. And so I'm just gonna go with my freezer bags. I'm just gonna use like a Ziploc. You can use a generic, whatever you want. But this is a freezer bag. So this is specifically made for freezing vegetables. You cannot use a bag that is not freezer safe because you will get freezer burn from that. So I'm just going to pop these in. You guys can see how easy this is. And I'm gonna push the air out of this. And then I'm gonna let these ladies flat because I want them to actually freeze flat like this in the freezer, so they'll stack in the freezer. And we're gonna go ahead and see how fast this goes. And that is it, you guys. That is it to blanching and freezing your green beans. So a lot of vegetables that you need to blanch are like this. Corn is like this. There are other vegetables like this as well. Thanks so much for joining me today. We hope that you've enjoyed this video. I hope that you've taken something out of this video, thinking that you can actually do something similar to what we're doing with just 10 minutes here, 20 minutes there, and have some security and some self-sufficiency in your own kitchen. Thanks for joining me. Hope you come back soon. Hope you're having the best day. Bye.